What's going on, guys? Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Wing and Tail Boys. On today's episode, I want to continue building on the concept of the best arrow build and kind of go over a little bit of what these different builds really look like, what they entail, give you a little bit of the benefits of what we consider to be the best arrow build, and then walk you through how you can find all the components if you're looking to build these arrows on your own. Let's get into it. So to start, let's talk about the differences between the three arrow builds. What's considered to be the standard arrow build is the build where you kind of just get all your components, your arrow, your inserts, your vanes, and your field points and your nocks. And you don't really give any thought to it. You kind of just go ahead, you put you glue your inserts in, you glue your vanes on, you put your nocks on any which way you like, and you go out and you shoot. Now what the scientific arrow does, as the name implies, is it brings a scientific approach to building these arrows. So what you want to do is weigh your inserts and only use the ones that are closest in weight to each other. And then weigh your vanes and do the same thing. And also pay attention to the spine of your arrow, which we're going to get into in just a little bit, as well as the orientation of your nock. Again, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Now what AeroConcept does is it takes the concept of a scientific arrow build and goes a little bit farther and installs, as our last video talked about, we install a 6-inch carbon insert into the front of our arrow. So here we have a AeroConcept 1 build where I have a 100 grain field point, a 19 grain half outsert. And inside of this arrow is glued a 6-inch tube. And we're going to talk about what that does for us in a little bit. And then after spine aligning the arrow, or all of the arrows, so that way the stiffest part of the spine is facing up, we install the vanes with the cock feather up and the stiffest spine facing up. So that way all of our arrows are oriented the same way. We're going to talk about, again, the benefit of that in just a little bit. And last but not least, we have a perfectly fit nock, which connected to it is a weight matched insert weight. Again, going to talk about that here in just a little bit. So there you have it. Those are the three builds and just the general differences between the three. Now let's dive into the scientific arrow build and AeroConcept 1.0. Now what the scientific build allows us to do is to ensure that our arrows are weighted the same, our FOC or our balance point is the same relatively from arrow to arrow, and that our arrow is going to behave the same way coming off our bow. So if all of the arrows are stiff on the top, when we launch our arrow, what that is going to do is our arrow is going to flex left and right exactly the same and up and down exactly the same, or as close to one another as possible, which means it's going to hit the air relatively the same, correct itself relatively the same, and group better at longer distances. Now where AeroConcept 1.0 really takes that scientific arrow to the next level is the inner tube that goes on the inside of this arrow. Now if you watched our last video, we talked about that a little bit with Cameron and Chad from Exodus Outdoor Gear, and what that does is it stiffens this portion of the arrow. So think of a pencil, okay? If we were to take a pencil, a full-size pencil, and try to break it, it doesn't take much force to break it when it's full. Now, if you break it in half and then take that half and break that half in half and take that half and break that in half, eventually you get to a point where you can no longer break that pencil. And that's because the shorter it gets, the stronger it gets. And we've kind of applied that same concept to an arrow. So when you take my arrows, for example, are 26 inches carbon to carbon. Okay, you add a little bit more for the nock and a little bit more for the half out, and we're probably talking more like 26 3/4 overall from the throat of the nock to the end of the insert. Now, similar to a pencil, when your entire arrow is spined exactly the same, your arrow is going to flex the most that it possibly can from end to end along the entire shaft. By gluing a 6-inch insert into the front of the arrow, what you're doing is extending, first off, the part of the arrow that doesn't bend at all, which is called the node. And by shortening the length by which your arrow is bending, it's not bending as far or as much in flight, which allows your arrow to recover extremely faster, much, much faster. But by allowing your arrow to recover faster in air, what you're doing is basically it's recovering faster, which means it's losing less energy trying to correct itself in flight. By it stopping its flex sooner, it stays truer to its path sooner, and due to the balance of this arrow, it's not a heavy FOC arrow. It is relatively balanced, somewhere between 8 and 12% FOC. And by shooting this more balanced arrow, not only is it recovered faster and retaining more energy downrange, it is also going to impact horizontally to your target instead of approaching at an angle. By it impacting more horizontally to the ground, you are transmitting maximum energy on impact from this arrow to the game or the target or whatever it is that you are shooting at. When you have an impact at an angle, your arrow is traveling from left to right or right to left or however you want to look at it, but it's not traveling flat. So on impact, that arrow is going to hit and want to correct itself as it travels through the target, okay? So it's going to come in, impact, come down, and bounce all around as it's trying to enter your target. So all of that bouncing around and trying to correct itself on impact is also wasted energy from the arrow to your target. So overall, what the AeroConcept and the scientific build both allow you to do is have a more consistent build from arrow to arrow. It allows each arrow to perform or react more consistently to one another. By spine aligning your arrows, you are taking the knock tuning portion of tuning your arrows out of the equation, which in my opinion, I have found to be the most tedious portion because you have to turn it ever so slightly each time and then realize whether one way is making it fly better and then go back and forth. In my opinion, that was just the biggest pain. By spine aligning these arrows, we've again taken that knock tuning portion out of the process. And by having a more balanced arrow, we are giving a more flat flight through a flatter trajectory to transmit the most energy on impact. So now for the last part of this video, what I would like to do is I would like to walk you through exactly how you can find the proper components for whatever arrow it is or whatever arrow you're choosing to shoot, whether it's a Black Eagle or a Gold Tip or an Easton or a Fire Knock or an Exodus, whatever arrow you're choosing to shoot, this component finder is going to help you. So you come to Fire Knock's website, fireknock.com, very easy. And click on this right here. This is going to come up right away at the beginning, the FACS system. And that's the Fire Knock AeroConcept or Aero Component Selector. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on that button and it gives you a list of just about every arrow manufacturer that you can possibly think of. And I'm going to use just a generic common arrow. Let's go with the Black Eagle. And I'm going to go with the Black Eagle Zombie Slayer. Nope, we do not want the crossbow. We want just the regular old Zombie Slayer arrow. And right away, it gives you all of the components that can work with that arrow. So if you're choosing to use just a simple scientific build, what you would do is you would go ahead and choose your knock, which would be the S knock for a 246 arrow. You would choose whichever insert you would like. That is either aluminum, brass. Well, brass is only available to the dealers. So there are 2 aluminum inserts that you could get for this yourself. And one is 11 grains and the other is 33. Now, if you choose to put the inner tube into your arrow, now that's going to change things just a little bit. So you have this carbon tube down here, which you would, click on and go ahead and put it into your cart or whatnot. But if you're going to use the carbon tube, you have to use one of these 4 You have to use one of these 4 inserts if you're going to use the inner carbon tube. I personally am looking to make a more balanced arrow. I'm not looking for a crazy FOC. So I would pick something with 19 grains. This lighter aluminum insert with 19 grains. You pick, if you're looking for broad field points from FireNock as well, you can go ahead and pick them. Personally, I do recommend FireNock inserts or field points. What FireNock or Dorge from FireNock has designed is a double rubber O-ring collar system. So if you look in here, each of these inserts or each of these field points have a double collar on them. And what that does is it ensures a concentric fit of your field point to your insert. And what that means is it makes sure that the center of the field point is in the center of your insert, which will also be in the center of your arrow if you build your arrow correctly. So moving on, you can select your insert if you'd like. Now, if you are not going to shoot a lighted knock, you can go ahead and skip this next part. But if you're going to shoot a lighted knock, there are a couple different avenues you can go here. No matter which way you go, you need this extreme shock end cap. That's going to stop your battery from ever shooting to the front of your arrow. I've had that happen to me with a few other lighted knock companies. I'm not going to mention any names, but it is a pain and overall could give you an arrow that you can't use anymore. But anyway, you need this extreme end cap, which you're going to glue into your arrow later. Now at this time, you can either choose to get the actual circuit system with the light and the battery, or what I prefer to do, to be honest with you, is to get the weighted system. If you scroll down, you have your weight matched system. And if you saw what I showed you earlier, let me show you again. We have our knock here that has a weight in it. And what this does is it imitates the weight of the battery and the light. So that way when you're shooting over the summer or you're practice shooting, you don't have to worry about wasting that light and that energy over and over and over and over again. So if you don't want to waste the circuits and the batteries, because let's be honest, they're kind of expensive to start, I would go ahead and get these weight matched practice weights and use them until you're ready to tune your broadheads, at which point I would say use what you're going to hunt with. So moving on, if you choose to go with AeroVane 2.0, which I personally again would recommend, so would Dorge, you can just click on here, AeroVane 2, and when you go to the item, it's going to give you like a whole explanation, which I strongly recommend reading, and I'll dive into that in another episode. But that kind of explains the science of it and what makes these vanes, in my opinion, better than any other vanes I've ever used or seen on the market. You can click on this option here, AeroVane 2 for a dozen arrows. View options, there are plenty of colors that you can choose from, which I absolutely love. I personally like to go with the company colors. I go with a mint and an orange with 2 mint and 1 orange as my cock vane. I like the orange because it stands out. And when I'm going to put a new arrow on, it really stands out to ensure that I'm putting it on in the proper direction. So you click which one, you select which one you want for your first, your second, and your third. I like to make my third arrow my cock vane, just the way I do it to make sure that I don't mess up. And you go ahead and order them for however many dozen that you're gonna make. And then if you're using AeroVane 2, as your arrow becomes more aerodynamic and less dependent on slowing the arrow down to correct it, you get into a world where you have to start narrowing down your options for broadheads. So if you're going to use AeroVane 2, what you need to do is click on the AeroVane 2 option and go down and click on one of the AeroVanes again. So let's just go into 2 since that's the one we're recommending. If you come down below into the description, it gives you a list of all the broadheads that have been tested and guaranteed to work with AeroVane 2. Now last year, I also used a Kudu Point 2 blade single bevel head and tested out the Annihilator 1-inch broadheads, and both seemed to fly okay with the AeroVane 2.0. I will say, disclaimer, they are not on the list here on FireNock's website. FireNock does not claim for them to work. That's just something that I've found in my testing. All right, guys, so that pretty much sums it up. Hopefully, I didn't ramble on too much. I think I did just a little bit, so I'm sorry for that. But we went over the differences between the three common builds. We went over the benefits of the Scientific Aero and AeroConcept 1.0. We went over the specifics of my Aero and what I've seen as far as the trajectory and angle of impact. And we went over how you can find, locate, and order any of the components that you need to build the Scientific Aero and AeroConcept 1.0. At the end of this video, after I wrap up, I'm going to have a couple links for you. Links from both Cameron from Exodus Outdoor Gear and Dorge, kind of walking you through how to build AeroConcept 1.0 if you're a DIYer like I am and you're looking to build these arrows on your own. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's about going to wrap it up for us today. I want to thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Wing and Tail Boys, where success is always just a commitment away. If you like what you saw today, drop a like down below, and if you have any questions, leave a comment, let us know what you thought. And as always, please take a second to subscribe to our channel down below in the bottom right-hand corner. And until next time, have a great day.